Welcome to the fourth lesson of the course How to Draw a Cup of Tea. In this course you will learn how to draw the basics of perspective for designers and architects. This fourth lesson is about dividing and multiplying planes in a perspective space. How can you find the middles in a perspective plane? And how can you make a series of cubes, all in the correct dimensions? As a designer or architect, you need to be able to sketch your designed object somehow in the right proportions. In this documentation, you see a square in the frontal view. This is outlined with the top view and becomes 1/4 deeper, which is also shown in the right elevation. So, if you draw this in perspective, you need to add 1/4 extra to a cube in whatever perspective view you want to make, in order to get your object looking the same in all of these drawings. If you know how to divide or multiply a cube correctly, you're able to give the right dimension to your object in whatever point of view it is shown. In this video, I will show you how to divide a cube in 8 equal smaller cubes. Also, the division by an odd number will be shown, plus making additional cubes of the same sizes in the perspective space. In this cube, a screenshot of the beginning of this video, the diagonals show the middles of the planes, but also of the whole cube and space. In mathematics, you can divide a square or rectangle in 2 or 4 equal parts by simply measuring the middle with a ruler. But if you measure the middle with a ruler on the two-dimensional print of the cube, you see that one side looks bigger than the other one in centimeters. And it differs from the center created by the middle, which is created by the threads. This is quite logical, because in perspective everything becomes smaller or even disappears towards the direction of the horizon. The further away in the perspective space, the smaller it gets. Conclusion: you simply can't measure the middle in perspective. In this photograph, you easily can make the vertical and horizontal divisions of all the planes on the outside of the cube. But you also can go inside the cube and make 2 vertical sections and 1 horizontal. Finally, you have divided the cube in 8 equal small ones. In math, I can find the middle of a square or rectangle by making the diagonals. This is the same in perspective. And so I need to draw all the diagonals on all the planes, then make the vertical and horizontal divisions, and finally make 3 sectional lines in the heart of the form in order to find the middle of the space and making 8 small equal cubes in the big one. If I want to get rid of some of them, I simply tone the ones which are left. There is also another method. Start with dividing the verticals in 2 equal sizes. Connect the middles, and with 1 diagonal you find the middle of the plane. This works the same in a 2-point perspective, because there is no foreshortening of the verticals in a 2-point perspective. But be aware, all the verticals are different in length. The left one is closer in my perspective view, and thus larger than the ones further away. The smallest one is the vertical or rib in the back. Start with dividing the verticals, but take care. All the vertical ribs have a different size, and so start with guessing the middle. Find out if this is correctly done, and if not, restore this. This part needs to be done quite precise. Then you can make a horizontal section of the cube, and finally on all the planes you draw 1 diagonal, and there are the middles. always draw the shortest diagonal in order to get the least deviation. If you have the middles, you make the vertical divisions, and finally you can make all the sections. Adding some tone and shadow lines. And so you could continue making even smaller cubes. Here is the result. This method is more secure because drawing two diagonals creates an accumulation of some nonchalance. Mind your eye if you see happening this. If the division of a bigger square in 4 equal smaller ones has this result, you can see with the naked eye that this is incorrect. Try to find where you made the mistake. Here the verticals are not divided well. In this more foreshortened plane, I didn't make correct diagonals, and when restoring this, you see that the second half becomes even smaller than expected. This is the effect of the enormous foreshortening of this plane, due to the close distance towards the vanishing point and thus the horizon. The conclusion is, never just guess the middles and stay critically looking at what you are doing. But now, how can you divide planes in perspective in 3 equal sizes? With 2 diagonals, you only find a half, a quarter, 1/8, etc. We look back in mathematics again. Divide the verticals in 3. Make the horizontal connection, and with 1 diagonal you find the 1/3 in the perspective direction. It works the same in perspective. Here is a screenshot of cubes in a raster of 3 by 3 by 3. If I first make the horizontal division and then use diagonals, you see the cubes exactly laying on the sequence. It is important to construct also the lines in the back in order to see where the cubes further away are laying. Now, let's see how we can use it, building our own designed house. In the documentation it's visible that the whole cube needs to be 1/3 diminished in the horizontal direction on the top, and the top becomes a half higher. The rooftop is in the middle. Find it with the diagonals. The half size extra simply can be made by doubling half the height in the middle, because the vertical is unforeshortened. Whoops, it doesn't fit on my paper. In the cube you divide every vertical in 3 equal sizes in order to draw the 1/3 of reduction into depth. With 1 diagonal on the front and the back of the cube, you find the verticals on the sequence, and you can cut off the 1/3 now. You also need to make the rooftop, ending on the right position. Therefore, you need to perform the same operations on the plane at 2/3 of the cube in the back. Finally, tone the drawing to see better your 3D space. Multiplying a cube is another thing. Most easy it is to multiply in a vertical direction, because in a 2-point perspective the verticals are not foreshortened. You simply double the vertical ribs, preferably on top of the original cube. But if the bottom cube is a very insecure one, the one on top will be twice as improper. You also could extend the cube downwards, but take care. In this situation you see that we are running towards a 90-degree angle in reality, which is of course an impossible situation. If the square on the ground shows an angle of 90 degrees, you never could see the verticals anymore. If you want to add a cube in the horizontal direction, you need to keep in mind the reduction of centimeters in the converging direction. Going back to mathematics shows that you can duplicate a square or rectangular form by first dividing the vertical in 2 equal parts and then making a diagonal crossing from the one angle on top to the middle of the vertical at the other side. Extending the horizontal directions brings you to the second square. Finally, you should see that the diagonal is the middle of the whole rectangle. Especially in perspective, you simply can't guess the additional size or double the size into depth. See what's happening if you do so. The difference with the correct method is quite big. Use the knowledge from math. If you want a second cube, first extend the horizontal directions backwards. Then divide the vertical in two equal sizes and draw the diagonal over the middle. You find now a second plane, which is the same as the one closer by. If the second square or cube doesn't look correctly, there is undoubtedly some insecurity. First restore this before you continue. If you do this with the whole cube, it's necessary to double the plane in the back too, because otherwise you will undoubtedly make mistakes in the perspective directions going backwards. Always take the shortest diagonal to minimize errors. How does this work in the other direction? Exactly the same. Now we have 3 cubes, and thus making number 4 is easy by using again some diagonals on top of the plane. But in the essence, if you make 4 cubes, you better could start with a big cube, cut away half the cube and add 1 diagonal like is shown before. The rule is always go from big to small. Thank you for attending this web lecture about drawing the basics in perspective for designers and architects. There is a next step: how to make a correct documentation of your designed objects.